What's going on, everybody? I'm sure we've all heard the saying, things on social media aren't always as they seem. As a matter of fact, we find this statement rings true more often than not, as is the case for one mother in particular. You see, as an influencer, it appeared she had it all. The perfect house, a happy family, nice cars. In essence, she was living the American dream. But behind those carefully curated videos, there was something sinister lurking behind closed doors. And well, one day, it all came crashing down when the shocking truth had finally been revealed. The actions of this mother were so disturbing and so vile, the backstory behind this TikToker quickly became known as the Texas House of Horrors. So without any further ado, let's talk about some TikTokers who did terrible things, episode 8. Zaikiya Duncan, otherwise known as Zaikiya Duncan 5 on TikTok. Creator class type, mom talk. Specialty, dancing with my children. Claim to fame, the Texas House of Horrors. Well, leading up to October of 2022, Zaikiya had been posting on TikTok for the better part of the past year. And throughout her time on that platform, most of her content involved herself having these fun little family moments dancing alongside her children. And in literally every single one of those videos, from the outside looking in, everything truly did seem to be perfect. However, off camera, things had quite literally been hell for an extremely long time. So to really and truly understand this story, we have to take things back an entire decade. And before you say, hey, look, everyone in this world deserves a second chance. Why are we going to dig back that far into someone's past in order to pull something out of their closet and get them canceled? Well, this is simply not the case. You see, back in 2012, the then mother of 3 lived alongside her boyfriend and father of her children, Nicholas Menina. And well, one day police are notified about a child that had been dropped off to school with severe burns ranging from his waist all the way down to his toes and everything in between. It was at this time he was then rushed to the ER to receive treatment for those burns. And as all this is going on, the police head on over to the couple's home. And as they walk inside that door, they discover a baby girl has been left there all alone. What's worse is, both her hands and feet have been completely bound with duct tape and she's been placed in extremely tight clothing. Further investigation would determine at least one of the 3 children had been forced to sleep on the bare closet floor. And while that first child was in the hospital being treated for burns, the other 2 would later be sent off and treated for bruising that was found all over their bodies. The couple was then charged with 1 count of child abuse apiece. So now we're going to go ahead and fast forward all the way up to 2019. Zaikiya, still living in Louisiana, has since parted ways with Nicholas and is now a mother of 8. It was at this point she began dating a man by the name of Jova Terrell. Well, it was also in October of that same year, Zaikiya was convicted of 1 count of cruelty to a child after she had completely deserted said child. However, since law enforcement was not able to publicly inform anyone about this case, news sources would go on to state they couldn't find any information about a child being removed at that time either. But as the following story began to come out, the answer to that question would quite literally be sitting in front of everyone's face. See, if we fast forward nearly 3 years all the way up to September of 2022, Zaikiya and Jova, along with her 7 children, had packed up and moved to a rather nice neighborhood in Cypress, Texas. Meaning that during one of those 2 investigations mentioned earlier, a child was quite possibly removed from her care. Now, while it's unclear what exactly brought the family to Cypress, what is clear is Zaikiya began posting a lot more frequently during this time period. And a few of her posts would even hit a few million views in the process. But in every single one of these videos, only 5 out of her 7 children could be accounted for. And while yes, there could be a completely rational explanation for why she doesn't want them on camera or why the teens do not want to be on camera, the reality was actually much more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. About 1 month later, 2 teens can be seen wandering around their neighborhood, knocking on doors and asking for help.
You need some help?
Yes. Can you put some letters in, please?
What's wrong with you? What? What happened?
Can you please? We just need somewhere to be right now.
No, we can't do that.
Now, this was well after 3:30 a.m. The boy and girl had escaped and started knocking on their neighbors' doors. And eventually, at around 5:45 a.m., a woman finally opens up her door and allows them into her home, locking the door immediately after they enter. And the first thing she notices is both teens are extremely malnourished, as well as having substantial scarring around most of their bodies. They also have extremely terrible fresh scarring around both of their wrists, as if they had just been restrained for an extended period of time. And when questioned about this scarring, the young girl takes out a pair of black handcuffs, places them on the countertop, and opens up about everything that had been going on. Zaikiya had been holding them captive, handcuffed in her laundry room, bound at the feet, and did not allow them to leave for any reason whatsoever, not even to use the bathroom. And when they finally had to take a bath, she would bring back in a bucket of dirty mop water for them to do so. What's more is, these children were barely fed enough to survive, and when they were allowed to eat, often Zaikiya forced them to drink bleach, urine, and even drain cleaner. Now, if that's not the literal face of evil, I don't know what is. And this is the mugshot taken most recently from this conviction. You see, when the two teens were actually taken to the hospital later that morning, police decided to stroll on over to Zaikiya and Jova's home, only to find that they had already packed up the remaining 5 children and fled the state. Literally, her first reaction after discovering they are no longer in that laundry room is to leave them behind. Well, newsflash, this would turn out to be the same 2 kids from back in 2012. It was later determined that they had in fact been removed from Zaikiya's care back in 2012, but for one reason or another, they were returned later on that same year. And throughout the course of that entire time, from 2012 all the way up until 2022, both of those 2 kids suffered the wrath of their very own mother in the form of some extremely brutal abuse. Well, just a few short days after the 2 teens had escaped, Zaikiya and Jova were apprehended during a traffic stop near LSU in Louisiana, and the couple has since been extradited back to Texas, where Zaikiya is currently being held on a $4.5 million bond awaiting her sentencing. She is currently in the process of being charged with 1 count of injury to a child and another count of aggravated assault on a minor. Now, it's very likely as we get closer to her date of sentencing, more charges will begin to rack up. And here's why I believe this to be true. You see, Zaikiya's original bond amount was $1 million. This had been increased to $4.5 million after more and more details began coming out about what these kids had actually been going through. You see, further investigation determined that over the course of that entire time period, they were beaten with curtain rods, whipped with electrical cords, burned, poked, prodded, punched by Jova, forced to eat and drink corrosive substances, and under the rare occasion the 2 had pent-up energy from being locked up 24/7, Zaikiya would ensure they fell asleep by forcing the 2 to overdose on Benadryl, sometimes taking more than 20 tablets apiece. Now, at this point, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, but Slamurai, didn't you mention that one of those 2 children back in 2012 was in school, while the other was an infant girl? And yes, you are correct, I did in fact say that. And this is where we begin to run into a bunch of discrepancies between the many news sources that started covering this case in October of 2022. And what I found across the board was that the sources that did not cover that 2012 incident specified there were only 7 children, whereas the news sources that did cover it specify Zaikiya as a mother of 8. And I have heard a couple of things about this. One of those being that in 2019, that same child that was deserted was the child removed from the home. On the other hand, I have also heard from people that know Zaikiya's family personally that state the child who was burned back in 2012 was actually an older child that has since moved out. And what we found is that the latter of those 2 statements was closer to the correct answer. Zaikiya's 17-year-old child was able to drive that car away from the scene on the day they were arrested, while the remaining 5 children were either placed with Zaikiya's family members or placed into the care of the state's protective custody. And you know, one of the most heartbreaking things about this case is the fact that when you look back into her videos, those other 5 children look like they are well kept, well fed, happy, and generally look like they are absolutely loving life. And on the other hand, you have this sinister act literally going on behind closed doors, where 2 kids are quite literally locked up away from society. And even if Zaikiya ever gives an explanation for why this was done, there is absolutely no explanation on this earth she can give that will justify the actions taken against those 2 children. So that is it, y'all. That is gonna do it for Zaikiya Duncan, at least until the day she's sentenced, and at that point, we will be updating you on this channel. Until then, I'd just like to say this. For those of you who made it to the very end of the video, it really does mean a lot, and the amount of support I have gotten in this community over the past few days and even weeks has been absolutely phenomenal. I cannot thank you enough, and I look forward to improving my craft as much as I can for you guys as we move forward. Stay safe, and I sincerely hope you have an awesome whatever it is, wherever you may be. Peace out.